and you want to sort of have, there's a spoof one, you can find out whether, you before somebody else finds out that, they're spoofing you, you can actually go and take it down. So there are applications which crawls of that one, and it needs to be holistically managed, right? You need to have a team. Because today, if you look at security, we go to a CSP. They will be pointed applications. So you can go to DDoS, you can buy WAF, you can buy all your L4. But how do you really integrate all of this information to make sense? Because you've got to have a integrated dashboard, if you will, right? So that it tells you all, a holistic picture rather than just a pointed information.
Yeah. So Satyam, from your perspective, on your service, how do you deal with all the L4, L7, all of these, and fake? Do you have any fake incidents also happening with y'all guys?
Hi, hello everyone. Not exactly fake incidents. We did face a lot of DDoS attacks during when we run our tournaments. I would say the attacks these days are very sophisticated. They read your patterns. It's not that they just do it immediately. They read what your vulnerabilities are. They also know these are the threats which you don't know about. Like the attack which we faced, the attacker was very confident that we are not aware of this vulnerability on our servers. And he was very confident in making an attack. And he knew that we are going to fall apart for that. So I think you yourself are the best judge for what your healthy traffic is. You need just like my fellow panelists mentioned, we can put up a WAF or we can put some layer 7 securities, but you are the only one who can identify these are my healthy URLs, these are my health checks, and these are my patterns of traffic. If something is crossing that, it goes into the bad cluster, and then we can put some restrictions like banning the IPs or banning the floods. Sometimes people, like these days there are a lot of botnets available publicly. Like you can just go to dark web and buy some botnets out there and do some proper distributed IPs attacks. It's difficult to stop them actually because they inhibit the healthy traffic out there. So that is why you have to be very clear about what your healthy traffic is, and you can maybe create a training model out of it, which mitigates it in real time.
Great,
There
thanks.
there are several solutions out there for detecting bots, and there are companies who specialize in detecting bots and all of that. Fundamentally, you look at it from, if a user, like, you have to design your product. All of this starts at the product level. You don't just throw in security. You design your product in such a way that, what if somebody comes in, how much damage can one fake account do? You start from there, and then slowly put in all these other layers are also, of course, important. You will not build it without the security, like the WAF and L7 security and all the standard things you do, like expiring tokens and all of that stuff you'll of course do. But at the product level, you have to understand fundamentally that if somebody gets in, what's the amount of damage they can do? And you start mitigating damage from that point onward, because you're gonna get hacked. That's a given. Something bad is going to happen.
Yeah. So Arvind, your perspective.
No, I agree with Viral a lot, right? And I think a little earlier on also what Viral said about user experience. I'll come back to that later. But I think thinking about a product, so we are still early stage with SuperCorrect, right? But with Pocket52, we've been around for over a year and a half, and we have a couple of gaming products. One of the things we've always realized is that if you think about security early on product development, it makes it a much more easier approach. And I agree with Viral, because otherwise what happens is and there's always this trade-off, especially early days of product development. You're making this call saying, should I invest abhi, or should I just put the product out and we'll put a blanket around it? And that balance is a very tricky one. But I think it's very important to err on the side of, at least thinking through security, even if you don't invest early, to kind of say, okay, this is how I'm going to build this in the future. These are the levels of protection I will have. As I catch fake accounts, I also start looking for fake accounts. And it kind of ties in with little bit with what Vishal also said, right? Because if you take that call of saying, I will think of security very early on, you will start seeing fake equivalents coming up, especially when you do real money. And it's important for you to literally do the equivalent of what the offline guy does. I am the only branch based story, right? And that challenge is a tough one to do, but unless you do it from very early on, so what happens is your whole team is aligned in one direction, and then getting everyone to start saying, guys, security is a big deal. You do pretty much upset a lot of your team team infrastructure, for lack of a better word, right? Your team structure, the way everybody thinks itself to this, and that's something we have done very consciously. So even when we were small, we kept saying, you know what, let's make sure that we're aware of the security risks. We don't need to fix it. You know, early you can say there's a cost, but I would still say make sure to list it out in your product document. Like, these are the risks. These risks we are not touching today. Kar denge. But unless you make that effort early, the cost of then correcting is much higher, and that's been our approach. Yeah.
Great, thanks. Sana, can you see where Sudhanshu is? He seems to have dropped off. I told him to drop out and drop in again. Can you check with him whether he's coming back again or not? Or has he having a connectivity problem? If you could check with him then before I go on.
Sure.
Because I checked with Sudhanshu and his net is unstable. He's again trying to log in.
Okay, great. So we'll continue with the conversation.
Sure.
So how many, I hear from some of you all that you'll have done it from the get-go when the product was being developed. How many of you will be honest enough to admit that you did not think security right from the get-go? Can you all put your hands up? Vishal, I can guess as much. What about Satyam too?
Yeah.
So what advice do you have to give these guys?
Security, see, it's a tough one. It's really a tough one when you start a startup. When you look at a startup, actually, like I think.
Remember, Vishal is not a startup. Vishal has done it once before he's doing it again.
Everybody starts up somewhere, right? As small, like Arvind put it. So obviously, security is typically most of the, in fact, why they are startup. Even for, I would tell you confidently from the experience, even some of the financial institutions, security is actually an afterthought, right? I mean, it's always evolves, right? So see, security fundamentally depends on pattern, right? I think, and like my co-panelists talked about it. So you're looking at a pattern. If the attacker is smarter and understands what pattern you already know, he will attack you with a new pattern, right? So you can't really over-design security. You also have to have the fine balance between how much infrastructure of that security you can have, and that's hence you actually go to a third-party guy, a guy who can pull into a large. So let's say if you're looking at one person with expertise in that area, then he can actually look at various patterns correlating across not just one organization but many organizations, and that sort of is what you look to help. Because that experience helps, because you're not looking at just one single attack. But of course, you also have to have a holistic view for it. So I can empathize with these guys or with anyone. Security typically is an afterthought, and I think I wouldn't be surprised with what most people have said.
I think which we did was we started like a bug bounty program at Goki, and we do give some small not millions of dollars, or we do give some people bounties. And we have seen, because the problem of security is that the guys trying to hack you will always be one step ahead. So idea is, how do you use the the so-called security experts to kind of possibly give you what are your vulnerabilities? Because like right, I mean, you can never be 100% secure, but you need to have a strategy. So right now, I think between what we do internally to the bug bounty program, I think these kind of things kind of work.
Right.
Yeah, that's an approach. Honeypot is another approach. I'm sure, like you said, security is just, you're never 100% secure, right? You're just waiting for the next one to be uncovered. And what really matters is what is the reaction time after you sort of uncovered one, right? That's really a very crucial aspect.
So, yeah, somebody was saying something?
Yeah, it becomes kind of a cat and mouse game, like who is ready to put in more resources. And it kinds of makes sense, not to, because the security measures which we take comes with a cost. So when you are initially growing, right, you are not going to get those many attacks. So it doesn't make sense to put so much resources into security at that point of time. I mean, like we got our first attack when we did a few days after we did our first PR. So they also know whom to target and when to target, and these people are growing, and now they have the money, to put in security. So it becomes a cat and mouse game, definitely.
So it's not reached the level of ransoms as yet.
I hope it doesn't reach that.
No, there have been ransoms. I would like to sort of disagree. There have been ransoms, and even things like somebody. Of course, it all depends on the level of security. That if you already have a good enough security, you will not be. But yes, there have been ransomwares.
I think
basically holding. Yeah.
Anil, one other very important point, and I think we need to take this up as an industry, is there is a massive problem of compliance of court orders. So for example, let's say you do find somebody trying to, hack you, you do find their email address, or you do find their Twitter handles, etc. The big problem is that none of these social media networks are willing to give up, even after court orders, these people's identities. So again, we are facing a similar issue. It's just that we are learning this from experience. In our case, we had a court order, and both Google, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, in complete contempt of court, are not even following the court orders. They are not following the cyber police complaint. Cyber police follows up. So I think some amount of responsibility needs to be put on these
Yeah,
platforms.
but they cite privacy laws, and you still haven't encountered Telegram piracy as yet. Get into that.
Exactly.
Trust
That's
me,
what
the
I'm
video
saying.
guys are going crazy
My
dealing
point
with
is
Telegram.
that in the socials, in the society, if you go to a housing society and say there is a gunda living here, the housing society will tell you who this is. But these platforms just refuse to comply. So at one end, they are making revenues from India, but on the other end, they don't comply with the, especially when you have court orders. When a court is saying that, hey, these are people who are, doing phishing or doing all kinds of things. And I know Paytm has its own share of problems with all the fake OTPs. So the problem is that till the time the platforms don't take responsibility, this problem will, because these people, these thieves will always be behind these platforms and enjoying the benefit of anonymity.
Great. So I get it, but I still sense even the US government had problems getting data out of these social media.
So with Patriot Act, the Patriot Act is there in the US, and if they follow the Patriot Act, the social media is supposed to comply. In India, even after our IT Act, the most of these platforms even refuse to say that they are going to be compliant with Indian Act. So the problem is that, yeah, in the US you can get some stuff, but in India it's becoming increasingly difficult.
Correct.
Yeah. Is somebody saying something? Yeah, Satyam.
Yeah, so I think RMG is also a very soft target for these attackers, because I think a lot of state government views are divided on this. So there is not a clear regulation for this. I mean, they know that there is a threshold after which it becomes a legal battle. So that is why I think RMGs are being targeted more.
Yeah, and it's bound to happen. I mean, I see a future, like especially in the OTT video side, you're actually having accounts being sold over there. You have accounts being picked up, and you have alternative feeds being, directions, downloads, torrents, and every Telegram is becoming a major problem for them. I don't know whether it's becoming a problem for y'all, or whether it's just the social media.
You can buy fake account of any game on Telegram.
Okay.
They are selling a virtual currency of every possible game in the illegal market on Telegram.
So that's a challenge which the industry will have to encounter. And so, Anand, what about your perspective on Telegram?
It should be shut down.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, these all see, the way to look at it is actually see it within the ambit that you have, right? You just look at what is a known risk and how do you really attack or sort of target it, right? If the framework or the legal curfew doesn't give you, there's nothing much you can do about it besides shutting it down, or change mechanisms so that you can protect your brand. This is about really protecting your own turf. So you actually focus energies and protecting your brand and your stuff rather than really working about the larger, because the larger battle will always be there. You can't really solve all the problems, and you are dependent in a way in a regulation of the law, or that's the way
what has happened is, and Anil, you mentioned Telegram. So Telegram has become the gateway to the dark web. That is the problem. So while WhatsApp is completely clean, the challenge is a kid can now start, buying all kinds of bots and all kinds of attack software. You can buy it on Telegram today. That's the fundamental problem, that, suddenly it's like saying that, weapons were not available in the open here, but today anybody can go to Telegram and buy any kind of phishing software and malware attacks. Anybody can start doing, because Telegram has become this gateway.
Great. Now, coming back to, how do you ensure that you really give that experience of near real time to the user? What are the best practices you can put in place for a platform, for a distributor, for an esports company? What are the best practices you can put in place? Anand, any
Work
feedback?
closely with Geo.
Sorry?
Work closely with Geo.
Okay. That's said in light. I mean, I have a Geo connection. At times it's erratic, at times it's good. So I don't think that's the answer. What are the other best practices we can put in place?
Yeah, one of the things that you really do is actively monitor the performance of your network, whatever network you're looking at, right? And there are tools to sort of do that, right? We have when I'll be very honest with you here that I work with a lot of competition and it's a competition in a way, right? But removing the hat that you typically wear, you always tell a customer, hey, Mr. Customer, there are 2 or 3 possible networks that you can possibly use to get your user experience right. Do you even have a tool to monitor it and measure it, right? You can definitely measure it on an online basis and make sure that you always choose a platform, or at least don't put all your eggs in one basket and use a multi-CDN approach or something like that, right? Which possibly then gets you the best performance. The other thing that you need to be looking at user experience, that since we told a lot about security, but you got it back on the user experience topic. Uh, in case of gaming, there is a pre-game experience and there is an in-game experience. Both are equally important for you to really get it right, right? And it's different. Right? There are CDNs which do pre-game experience better. There are CDNs which do in-game experience better, right? And you really need to know what are the peering relationships, because a lot today it's not. While a lot of it is user-driven, no matter what's going to happen to Geo or the story that they're right, you will always have a situation where there will be 3 or 4 different service providers, the end last mile service providers who's actually serving the customers, right? Because of the nature of how Indian territory is. So it's very crucial for you to understand the network performance from a delivery perspective, from a CDN perspective, and from understanding the latencies on a real-time basis, so that you can actually direct the traffic who's the best performing network at that given time. And there are actually tools available for you to tweak your traffic and shape your traffic.
Yeah, but
Yeah. We have done, right, and this is very internal to us, and I don't know what everyone else does. But one of the things we said is, again, it came down to when you're thinking real time, how do you move as much of your communication to being as close to text, right, and step away from any other form of literally data exchange. And that obviously has implications on how you structure then your application also. But that then, see, because whatever, I mean, in Vishal, like he said it in jest also, the fact is you're going to be working with most of your users being on mobile networks, and that challenge is not something we can ever, as an industry, also even overcome, right? That is what you are going to be, we're going to have. Your user is going to have only that. So you have to survive that, because this is going to be the norm. So how do you fit within that norm? So how do you make sure that the communication that the user has to do with your platform is as limited as possible, right? I mean, some of the larger distributors have done this very well, and we can plug into some of them, or we can try and build our own versions of saying, okay, in my product, the lightest way to drive any communication could be this. And I think, again, the problem comes to the same thing, right? Which is that you have to invest that time to say, how do I make my communication as lightweight as possible? I'm just trying to be simplistic in the way I would say, and making the effort to say my communication is lightweight would then lead to a lot of product thinking. And the reason, obviously, I'm coming from the startup space, right? Much more early stage than almost everyone else here. And and I think that balance is something we don't often do. We don't invest in saying, I will make communication as light as possible very early. What happens, I put my POC out there with the easiest protocols available, or with the easiest open source tools that I can get. But if you invest that time early to say, okay, I'm going to make sure my user is always on a weak network, and let me solve for that from the beginning, it kind of makes it much easier going forward, right? And some RMG games have done this quite well, right? And this is just a comment as a user, but I think that's something a lot of upcoming products have to be very consciously aware of.
Right, correctly. So just to add to what Arvind said, like being lightweight is very important. Serving things through CDN helps a lot. And I think a major part is you have to write some very good fallback mechanisms. Let's say if your user is having a good 4G network, but he's traveling, somewhere and he keeps on moving through like 4G, 3G, 2G, you need to have a fallback in your backend and client both. Like in your backend, if he is on 4G, you can just upgrade to socket connection. If it goes to on a 4G, you can fall back to a polling mechanism. So you have to make sure that your network switches as per the availability of the client, and also you render less information on his screen when he's on a lower network. So just to make sure the critical part is always there to give him the experience of playing.
Yeah, but Sandeep, in the case of handsets, the processing power of the handset comes in also into play if you have a graphic heavy kind of a game that you're playing, unlike the simpler games.
Yeah, that's obviously true. I think what Satyam said about, and Arvind also about being lightweight from a communication perspective, that being lightweight in a lot of ways depends not just on the kind of communication protocols that you've chosen, but also obviously on the devices on which you're rendering your game.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
And so in terms of the user experience, coming back to the first question that was posed here, user experience is not, it's not just carte blanche, a certain user experience that you want. It's really the best user experience possible for a certain user while playing on a certain device, operating under certain network conditions. Right. So all of that sort of ties together and goes back to some of the points being made about, having a smarter engineering team that's cognizant of the choices that they're making upfront. Before they go, go down a certain path, and then they have to do a major course correction later. And that's where I think that's what separates some of the better teams from not such good teams, to be honest.
Yeah. So how many of you are taking a multi-CDN approach, not just a singular CDN? Huh? Anyone? Nobody's answering. So nobody is it?
No,
recently deployed it.
We are.
Okay.
It's similar to, I'll tell you my experience. What happens is, I think all the right points made by the co-panelists in terms of definitely your intent is to make your application light, but how much of a light you make, you still have to deliver it. You still need a network to deliver that. Definitely, you can't be sure with that. But most of the launches, see, everybody's under pressure to launch, and I know, I'm sure most of you guys can talk about it, that when you're in a startup or even a non-startup environment, you're always under pressure to launch the next thing, right? So when you're looking at that launch, there's tremendous pressure for you to work with just CDN. Nobody bothers whether you want to work with different CDNs or not, right? Nobody leaves with that. So that important piece, like Sandeep mentioned, that you have to be aware, very few people do it because they first get away with the launch and they say, you know what, let me first launch with, it doesn't matter, I need to launch my product first. And then it becomes an afterthought where you want to use a multi-CDN or not. So that's where the pitfall comes, because then what happens is your user experience suffers that later, because then you don't know. See, any CDN, finally at the end of the day, what's the CDN? CDN is what you're just basically outsourcing capacity management problems to a third party guy, hoping that he's got a better infrastructure, right? And it's not that he does not have, he also has the same problem. Whether you take any CDN provider, he doesn't know what infrastructure size. But since he's serving many customers, hopefully the pool is large enough that you're not crowded out. But really it doesn't happen that way. So the point is, today if there's an IPL match today in the evening and suddenly there's a super over, suddenly you'll probably be having a 1 crore sort of simultaneous subscribers, and that will absolutely crowd out your gaming traffic and wash you out also if you didn't have a multi-CDN. A lot of people don't realize that, right? Because then what is happening, yes, you are not out, but you are getting served from a suboptimal network, probably something outside the country and not even getting cleared in the country. A lot of people don't realize that, and hence it's important that you place enough experience and emphasis on your development approach for a multi-CDN right from day one. It should never be an afterthought, because then you're going to suffer for this. You won't even realize, because IPL match lasts for 3 hours, right? After 3 hours, if the team is not watching for it, after 3 hours, you'll probably be getting a better performance.
Yeah.
So that's where it works.
Yeah, just to add to that, like there are companies, some of the most successful gaming companies in the world have invested in creating their own networks. And also, I mean, this whole, we talk a lot about in the gaming world about skill-based matching, and I'm sure Satyam at Pocket52 would be familiar. You do matchmaking not just on the basis of skills, you also have to do it sometimes on the basis of latency being observed by your end users, right? And so network does play, as Anand said, plays a humongously critical part in just managing that user experience you want to deliver for your users.
Just to tell you some of the things that we've observed, that's why I think Dhaval mentioned about the ultra live latency, right? We've noticed that but just changing a protocol, just choosing a right protocol gets your delivery time from say about 12 seconds down to about 3 seconds from screen to screen, right? That's our observation, right? And we've been working to sort of leverage that, especially in the live world, because it's so much matters. If I'm watching an IPL match and I hear somebody else shouting a six, before I do that, I'm going to be absolutely pissed off as a fan, right? So it's important that, I get the same experience uniquely done to everyone, right? So it's important how you talk about ultra live delivery as well as, looking at network, take control of that. And there are tools available. You don't have to be, tie down to one specific network. Just pick the network, get a multi-CDN, and put rules in a way that your experience is in your control rather than the service providers. Because service provider is going to act basis of what works best for him, not for you. It is not going to happen that he is going to prioritize your priorities of user experience. He's going to just prioritize his performance and his delivery points, not yours. So it's better you always sort of factor that.
So how much of a role does if you have CDNs, edge CDNs and edge servers, how much of an improvement can we bring about with that?
It depending upon what networks you are in. So you see, there are a CDN. There's a lot of misnomer in terms of number of nodes and number of infrastructure. It really doesn't matter actually, right? What really matters is the exchange that you have between networks, right? So because CDN is always a factor of how many network endpoints you're already connected and the capacity that you have, right? These are the two things that drive. But there are now, what we're trying to do is rather than just relying on that is anyway a basic foundation. What we're doing is we're changing the protocols, right? We're actually choosing a different protocol. Let's say if you choose a different protocol, you can get anywhere between what current network you have, at least a 20% to even a 35% improvement of your existing performance that you have, right? On a choosing the protocol perspective. So that's the saving that you can look at. Of course, it also matters what the CDN provider is and what kind of technology that he is using to sort of deliver it as well.
Great. In terms of best practices internationally, you said you work with a lot of international clients. What are the best practices they are? Are they listening to you, each of them, or are they? Is it similar to what they're doing in India, or is it different?
Well, so India, as like you said, right? India now is becoming the hotbed. You will not have India is such a unique country. You will not have 1 million concurrencies anywhere outside India. That's unheard of, right? So what you do in India, if it works in India, it works everywhere. It's like, if you can drive in India, you can drive anywhere. It's just becoming that. So to coming to the important aspect around what are the global best practices, which we are saying to sort of do it. A lot of emphasis is paid on user experience and quality, and that is actually driving something called media edge, right? So basically taking the distribution to the cloud, to the edge. So when you say edge, you're not looking at just nodes or something like that. You're trying to get as close as to the last mile possible, right? So that's something which we are changing. Second thing which we are doing is, looking at conversion of choosing the specific protocol. So if you choose TCP versus UDP, just choosing the protocol itself gives you at least a 20% efficiencies in what you're doing, right? So that's the second thing that is happening, right? And these are the practices, like I said, it is nothing to do with global or Indian. Whatever happens in India is get adopted globally and vice versa, because the companies that who are playing in this market are all global in nature. There's no one specific localized stuff that you see here.
Great. We have 5 minutes to go. Any last minute points? Each of you can make them, beginning with Sandeep.
I think a couple of themes around here with respect to user experience and how latency or network performance ties into delivering a superior user experience. And we alluded to also, obviously, device performance. All of these have to be very, a game developer has to be super cognizant of sort of embedding these things into his computations when he's really designing for that user experience, the desirable user experience.
Great. Satyam?
I think, just, having a good monitoring system and seeing what your healthy patterns are, and this building growing your backend around that will definitely help a lot. And paying attention to your user experience. That's what I would say.
Rahul?
Yeah, so as already mentioned, so the serving your content through both dynamic and static through CDNs, building your application as lightweight as possible, doing communication is in the few number of packets as you can, doing some packet level optimizations, compressions techniques in order to have a great user experience even in flaky uh, internet connections. Uh, Keep track of all the threats that you might get. Keep a monitor there in order to avoid some any threats or attacks. So yeah, uh, so the user experience, security, and low latency are the key aspects of delivering a very smooth gaming experience.
Thank you. Viral?
We broadly spoke about two things, right? One is the security part and one is the network optimization part.
Yeah.
On the security part, assume you're going to get hacked and then design what is the worst that can happen in your product and put in limits of how much damage can a hacker can do, and then do everything possible to prevent those hacks. But you are going to get hacked one way or another. So assume you're going to get hacked, design your product that way, put in limits, put in circuit breakers, put in limits. And on the network side, everybody wants to do everything real time. But what does real time mean? For a Zoom call, real time is 300 milliseconds. Hotstar is waving a victory flag at 12-second delivery. That's a 50x, 70x difference. So what is real time? Which pieces need to be actually optimized? You don't need to optimize everything. And uniformity of experience sometimes trumps fast experience for the users. So it depends on your use case. Just focus on narrowing down exactly what you need to optimize, and then you should optimize those things with multi-CDNs or whatever. Don't optimize everything. That's a waste of time and money.
Thanks. Yeah. Arvind?
So, see, for from our perspective, right, or from the perspective of the upcoming startup, I think the one thing that's very important, like Viral said very early, is to get your user experience thought through at the meta game level. And often when we think about user experience, we invest so much time on the screens, the look and the feel, the buttons, the flow. I think what we forget is how will the user pre-game, in-game, and then kind of post-game, right? So you come back to it, and what happens outside of the game for the user. I think getting that part of the user experience thought through is very, very valuable. And that leads to, when you do that thinking, what you can also do is actually understand the risk, right? How would you break your own system? And you are probably the best person to judge that. And when you do that, when you make that judgment, you at least go into saying, well, these are really major risks. And if this happens, I'm going to lose count of where my user stands itself. So how do I protect that is at least the bare minimum. So how do I make sure that an attack doesn't take me down overnight? And yes, you are going to get attacked. Right? At least if your most critical factors are well protected, you at least in the worst case as a very, very early stage product, you at least have a backup that can come and replicate, right? And make it completely independent. So you can be very, if you think about it in detail, you can have very simplistic solutions which can just be completely separated solutions, just the most basic stuff, right? Which people it may not look sexy, but it serves a need, right? It lets you survive. I think sometimes you have to draw that balance because you obviously can't overinvest when you're early. If you don't invest in product thinking and tie your security thinking to product, you will kind of, I think you will slip a lot.
Right. Vishal?
So I would say that, I mean, especially when it comes to performance, video is a very different challenge. But in gaming, you can use AI to actually augment for latency. And that approach is possible for a lot of the games we are building, because clearly, while you want to have a battle royale with 100 people in a map. So, and that's what, not only us, I mean, a lot of games do that very smartly. Video, of course, does not have that liberty of using AI to augment latency. So very frankly, while at one end we are talking about latency, I am personally excited about the whole advent of cloud gaming and platforms like Stadia, which Google is doing, and a few others, where eventually we are all going to be streaming these games to phones, and your phone will just be a very lightweight mind. So actually, in the next couple of years, as we are looking at a lot of the heavy lifting happening on the server side, I think these issues will become less of a challenge because platforms will be handling this at scale, and we'll be building apps on top of that.
Yeah, then we'll have to take care of the battery life of the phone, which is a challenge. We'll come to let Anand have his last words.
I mean, I think in all, I think you should look at it's a fine balance between development efforts early on and enough attention to both security as well as performance. Making sure that you are in charge of that rather than the service provider that you're looking at. That's the real crucial part if you want to get the user experience right, because both security as well as performance really drives that. So that would be my closing comments on that.
Thank you very much. It's a pity we couldn't have Sudhanshu for this because he had a bandwidth problem, which is what a lot of gamers face, which is a lot of us game service providers face. But thank you, all of you all. I think it's been an interesting panel. I hope the audience liked it. And thank you to each of the panelists, to Anand, to Satyam, to Vishal, to Rahul, to Viral, to Arvind, to Sandeep. Thank you for being a part of this. And thank you for making the inaugural session of GEMS this year an interesting one. Thank you.
Thank you.
Not an
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.